All right, welcome back to the channel. And today I'm so excited because it feels like a pretty big milestone. I've been talking about it for a while, but I'm finally gonna start and kick off my Malazan reread. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. Hopefully this will be one of many in-depth videos on Malazan as I reread them. You don't have to worry about spoilers for the whole series. Today's video will just cover part 1, and my plan as of right now is to cover them in parts. So Gardens of the Moon has 7 parts. I'm hoping to do a video, or the plan is anyways, and like I said, it can always change as I do more of these videos. Maybe certain parts don't have enough meat and potatoes, if you will, to justify a whole video, so I might combine them. But for now, the plan is to do one video per part of each book. It allows me to go really in depth, hopefully, on that specific part, and really give my in-depth thoughts more than just a whole book review. So if you don't know anything about the channel, Malazan is my favorite series. And if you have been paying attention to the channel at all, that'll come as no surprise to you. I finished it last year in March, but I actually started my BookTube channel when I was already about halfway through the series, so I didn't want to jump in and start my reviews of the books the first time I read them through on book 5 or 6, because those were the ones that were fresh in my mind. Whereas I felt like I'd really have to go back and dig into the first few books to do detailed reviews. So, and I've also quickly realized after reading Malazan that it was a series I was very interested in doing a reread. So I figured, why not just hold off on doing my in-depth reviews on each book until I go through and do those rereads. So yeah, that's just a little background about me and my experiences with Malazan. But as far as what you guys can expect from the videos, I'm by no means no expert there on Malazan. There are people who have read the series over many times, and this is just my first reread. Rather, my aim is not to be an expert in any and all things, but I just want to start a more in-depth discussion about it, hopefully in the comments below, and maybe serve as a little bit, not so much as a guide, but just almost as like a reading partner or buddy, but really it's just a fellow fan of the series, giving a fan's perspective on the series, a little more in depth, obviously, because I'm doing videos on each part. And I originally got the idea when I was reading through the series the first time, because I wanted a little bit more of a little bit more in-depth videos than what was out there. And granted, I'm sure it's out there and I just wasn't looking hard enough. But I was just yearning for something a little bit more detailed, bit more in-depth. So yeah, that's what hopefully you guys can expect. And like I said, I won't do any series spoilers throughout these videos, because I know for many of you, hopefully you'll be reading through it the first time and going through these videos as I read through it for the second time. But if I do want to give my thoughts on how the events in a part of a book and how that implicates or foreshadows something in the future, foretold in the story as a whole, I'll save that to the end, if not a separate video entirely. And then that way, and I'll put up flashing lights or whatever, or make it very obvious, like spoilers for the whole series, and it'll be at the end. I'll make it obvious if I even go there. But I'm thinking too, when I finish each book, I'll put out maybe a non-spoiler review, an in-depth review on the book as a whole, and then maybe in that in-depth review, I'll go more into how it ties into events throughout the whole series. Maybe even tie up some ice novels, but who knows? I'm just doing this flying by the seat of my pants. So like I said, things can change very quickly. So I'm more than welcome to your guys' feedback. Let me know down below. So without any further ado, let's get into Gardens of the Moon. As you can see, I've got some sticky notes in here, so I've paid a little bit closer attention than I did the first time through. And that is something I want to say too. If you're going through this series for the first time, I didn't take any notes. I'm not typically a note taker when I read, but I didn't take any notes. I just kind of was reading and see where it took me. I wasn't stressed about learning every single thing or catching every single thing on the first read through. And I think that attitude served me really well, because Malazan, if you've heard anything about it or you've read it, you know it can be a little bit overwhelming. I actually think it's a little overblown. It's not like, yes, Malazan is dense, but it's nothing like the average person can't consume and understand. But Erikson's writing is a little unique. He doesn't come out and he doesn't do like info dumps at all. He very much is going to show you things about his world, about the Malazan world, and you're going to get little bits and pieces here and there as you go along. So, and it's writing that's very unique. Andy Smith actually has a great video about how it's Erikson writes in a postmodern way. And basically what that means is it's not traditional. He doesn't hold your hand. He doesn't feel the need to explain everything to you. And that's why Gardens of the Moon is one of the most difficult books to get through, because if you're not used to that, it can feel jarring and a little bit disenchanting to some people. But what I can promise you is if you do get through Gardens of the Moon, and I say get through, I loved Gardens of the Moon on my first read, but the general consensus is if you can get through the first 3 books, Memories of Ice is one of the best books ever written, in my opinion. My favorite book of the series, and it's book 3. So not to say that the series falls off after that, but anyways, I'm giving a lot of thoughts on not just part 1 of Gardens of the Moon right now, but it is the kickoff video, so I've got a lot to say. And I will actually link up above here. Hopefully it'll show up. I did put out a video, if you haven't seen it already, in March when I initially finished the series, and I give my non-spoiler thoughts on the series as a whole. So if that's something you're interested in, if you haven't read the series yet and you want my non-spoiler thoughts on the all 10 books and what I thought of it, go check that video out. But like I said, I'm a big Malazan fan. It's my favorite series of all time. Erikson's my favorite author of all time. So let's get into part 1, because we're rambling, which I'm known to do, especially on a Malazan video. But typically the ramblings are usually Malazan related anyways. So, all right. So part 1 starts off obviously with a prologue. Not too long. It was like 10 pages or something. And we see Perrin, who hopefully you've read all of part 1 at this point, because there are going to be obviously part 1 spoilers. But Perrin is a young boy talking to Whiskey Jack at Mox Hold. And their conversation is intriguing, because Whiskey Jack obviously warns Perrin, who's this young kid who grew up in a noble's house, is kind of like bored, dreaming of things more exciting than a noble's life, if you will. And Whiskey Jack very much makes it obvious and warns him like this soldier's life basically isn't all it's cracked up to be. It's not like something super glamorous. You're better off just living a quiet life. He even says like a life ignored by the gods is a good life, basically. You don't want to catch a god's eye. And that brings me to my first point, where you do learn bits and pieces in part 1 about Erikson's magic system, and at its core we're slowly learning about there's like gods out here that take a lot more active role, it seems, in the world than maybe what you're used to in the traditional sense of a god who is very detached. Based on just Whiskey Jack's what he's saying to Perrin and some other details that we find out throughout the part as a whole, we learn that gods and ascendants, which is basically the prerequisite to a god in this universe, at times do very much almost treat the human world, if you will, as like their own chessboard. There's politics behind the scene that basically human lives can be thrown away very easily, and they don't mean much to these gods, which is why Whiskey Jack warns Perrin very early on not to get noticed by them. And it's very much apparent that, we know as the reader, and especially even just after finishing part 1, that Perrin obviously is not destined to be ignored by the gods. He's going to obviously become a soldier because that's what he's always dreamed to do as a kid, and he's going to get caught up in something that's way bigger than himself, and he's going to get entangled, it appears, by these gods. Okay, so after the prologue, chapter 1 starts 7 years after that, 2 years before the main events of the remainder of the book. And it starts off with a conversation between a young fisher girl, who we now know as, having read all of part 1, is Sari, and this old craggly wax witch, who is known for prophesying and keeps the souls of her husband in candles that she burns every night, and she had 5 husbands. Really intriguing character, but we know that a soldier comes by, pretty much offhandedly just smacks her down, kills her, and in her like dying moments, she intertwines Sari and her souls together, basically almost possessing Sari. So after that happens, Cotillion and Shadowthrone appear, who are the gods and ascendants of Shadow, and basically take this opportunity to use Sari as their pawn, which we find out obviously later when she's in the bridge burners and some of the things. She's no longer this young innocent fisher girl we know. They twisted her into basically a tool of Shadow, an assassin. Quick Ben and Callum are described some of the things she's done, which are absolutely horrific. Even though they've been in she's been with them for 2 years, they still call her a recruit, because very much they don't accept her as a bridge burner. So that's kind of their way of keeping her distanced. So already Whiskey Jack's warnings to Perrin, is coming to fruition. It's what a life can turn into that's been used and abused by these gods and ascendants. So really intriguing there to see what happened. But then we come to the Siege of Pale, which is such an amazing start battle scene, if you will. To come so early in a book is very, very rare, and it kind of gives you a glimpse and taste of how epic the series can be. This is such a great scene, and it's really just a sliver of what's to come as far as the scale of these battles. But you have a floating like moon city, which when I first read this, I thought I was like trying to picture in my head of like the scale. It's hard because it's described literally as a moon. But I think it's in my head anyways, and you can, if you guys are more seasoned veterans, if you will, of Malazan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be about the size of the city of Pale itself, which is a pretty big city, because we have the Lord of Moonspawn, Animander Rake, who seems already so epic and awesome. This Tist Andy, who's like an ancient being with black skin and like pitch black and silver hair, long silver hair flowing, and he is just firing down a rain of like magic onto the Malazan army, who's their high mages are firing back, and we see Taishren firing waves of sorcery into this floating moon, and like cracks and like chunks of it are falling off into the city of Pale and killing citizens. It's just such a cool scene. But really the important thing to note here is something appears to be going on with Taishren and Tattersail. There seems to be quite a bit of friendly fire going on, and we see the 3 other mages, high mages, in the Malazan army seem to be taken out by friendly fire. And Taishren, it seems to have been almost his scheme to take out some of the Emperor's old hands, they call them. So Lasine is doing a bit of house cleaning as the new Empress. Doesn't want any of the old guard loyalists, if you will, there. That seems to be the motivation here. But obviously that stirs some things up because Tattersail doesn't appreciate that, and neither do the bridge burners, who were one of the old Emperor's most loyal units. Their numbers were about 1,200. They were described as digging tunnels under the city of Pale to try and get, during the siege, trying to get around these giant walls they have. And during the actual siege of Pale, that we see those tunnels collapse, killing all but 39. So they go from 1,200 to 39. And obviously Whiskey Jack is the sergeant of the core of them there. So already there seems to be some plotting and mischievous things going on there. And also during this siege, we see Hairlock, one of the mages in the army, gets pretty much cut in half, is in the process of dying when Whiskey Jack, Quickben, and Column come up. And Quickben ties his soul to this like wooden puppet marionette thing, and Tattersail is states like that's basically forbidden magic that's been lost over the years. She has no idea how Quickben did this, is very much worried as to what the consequences of this could be. And Hairlock is just a hilarious character when you stop to think about that. He's like a puppet this big, a wooden puppet, and he is just so angry and like crazy. But I love Hairlock as a little character. Just so much fun. Always spewing hate towards Tattersail, openly saying like, just wait until I don't need you, I'll, turn your back and I'll kill you or whatever. So he seems to be like completely lost his marbles, and it appears to be from this soul binding that Quickben did, probably why the magic's forbidden or lost, because he's completely off his rocker in this case. So that's just a really fun character, one of many Erikson's great comedic reliefs, it seems. So, but regardless, back on track. Now that Tattersail and the remaining bridge burners have, are convinced that Taishren has basically betrayed them, tried to kill them, wipe them off the face of the earth, they begin plotting their scheme to get back at him, which we don't see. They don't get into the details too much here, but they're trying to find a way to get back at Taishren, but they're hesitant to act, justifiably so, because they're not sure if Taishren's working on the Empress's order, or whether he's trying to work on his own or using his own motivations. But we do see a little bit of that the bridge burners and Tattersail don't seem to be turning a blind eye to this one. Understandably so, because he tried to kill them. So, and then also while we have all that going on, Perrin, who remember is the character from the prologue, talking to Whiskey Jack, he now gets assigned as captain to their squad, and he is linked up with the adjunct Lorne. Adjuncts are basically the Empress's right hand woman in this case, but they're seen as like a hand of the Empress, very much an act of her will, an extension of her will, if you will. So Perrin is linked up with the adjunct, who assigns Perrin to be the captain of the bridge burners, who Perrin is a little bit hesitant to do this because, one, he's very much a young, he's been in the army for a few years, but doesn't justify being the captain of one of the most legendary units the army's ever had. So he's hesitant there, and then he also knows that it's rumored that they've gone through quite a few captains because they keep getting killed, kind of stating that if you don't live up to their standards, you go missing, sort of thing. So he's worried about that. And then we actually see he gets to Pale and goes to a bar, runs into a few of the bridge burners who we haven't seen yet. That being Picker, Hedge, Trotz, Mallet, those people, and has some exchanges with them. And I believe it was Hedge who even said, just by the way he talked, they kind of initially dismissed him as just being like a noble's kid, and that's why he got assigned. But Hedge, I think it was described, there was something in his voice that he could tell he was like good people, and garnered his respect, which was very rare because Perrin's so young. However, Perrin leaves the bar and gets murdered. Gets murdered by, we find out, Sari, who's acting now, we very much know is acting as like an assassin of Shadow. So yeah, he gets murdered. You think he's dead, but then we find out that he is in Hood's realm, basically on Hood's gate. Hood you can think of as like the Grim Reaper. So he's about to die, or has died, but his soul is, about to leave or go into Hood's realm. And you'd think there's no turning back at that point. And that's when Open intervenes, who we find out is like this god of luck or chance. Tattersail, when she does the deck of dragons, Open is often depicted as like a spinning coin, basically a god of chance, described as a jester, a character. And they're twins, actually, representing the prod and pull of luck. And they intervene, basically saying, okay, Perrin, we're going to spare your life. We're going to turn you into one of our pawns. So very, very interesting. Whiskey Jack, obviously, foreshadowing a life is best ignored by the gods. And Perrin very much cannot get away from that at this point. So it'll be interesting to see where his storyline goes from there. Now very much being a pawn of a god. And we saw how that turned out for Sari. This young, innocent fisher girl got warped at the age of 13, and she's now 15, into the assassin of Shadow, brutally murdering people, seeming to enjoy it. So we see what being a pawn of a god can do to somebody. Never a good thing, like Whiskey Jack said. And then from there, the Whiskey Jack squad gets assigned to infiltrate Darujistan, and once again, they're skeptical. They're not sure if this is Lysine, the Empress's way of getting rid of them. Maybe something catastrophic will happen in Darujistan, or if it's the adjunct. But Dujek basically says it doesn't matter if it's the adjunct or if it's the Empress or Tayshran. As a soldier, you get assigned somewhere and you go there. So that's where this part leaves off. They're now leaving Pale, and they're taking the Maranth flying creature, which I think is just a giant dragonfly, but I'm not sure. That's the description. Everything they described it as, I'm like, this feels just like a gigantic dragonfly that like 10 people can ride on. So that's pretty cool. but Moranth are these like weird half-human bug people, which seem mysterious. But anyways, it makes you question like where'd they come from, how'd they get that way. But anyways, Erickson always one to hold the cards close to his chest. So that's where we leave off, and I do just want to touch quickly on the deck of dragons, which is like this world's tarot cards, but very much more interesting than that. Pretty much all the gods or whatever get a card in these deck of dragons, and certain people, adepts, can serve as like a vehicle to foreshadow certain events, and it's very unclear, gives you like a general idea of maybe what's to come, but it's just one of the really, really cool things in the Malazan world. So okay, that ends my first part of my reread in-depth reviews. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, I think I'll keep the format the same and for the future videos, and change it as needed as I get more feedback and stuff like that. But if you guys made it to the end of the video, let me know down below. One, have you read Malazan before? If so, the whole series. If so, how many rereads? Two, if you haven't finished the series, which is totally understandable, let me know where you're at in the series. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll catch you in the next one.